everybody. Welcome back. My name is Derek Main, and I review translated literature. And today, Three to Kill by Jean-Patrick Manchette, translated from the French by Donald Nicholson-Smith, and it is from City Lights, specifically City Lights Noir imprint. Okay. Let me set the scene. So, you're a middle-aged Parisian man, fairly wealthy. Your wife is a film producer. You do some kind of business. You're very good at it. You make good money. Kids. You're about to go on vacation because it's Europe and the French. Unlike in America, you're going to get a long vacation. I believe it's like almost the whole summer at the beach. Okay. Before this, you're driving late at night. You like to drive late at night and listen to old jazz records and clear your mind. It's cathartic. You witness an accident. You stop and you see a man struggling. The man who's been in the accident is hurt. You pick him up. You take him to the hospital. You leave the hospital. You just did a good thing, right? Let me tell you about why I decided to read this. So, as I said before when I teased that I was going to be reading this, while I was reading Piglia's Target in the Night, which I absolutely loved, I was listening to the 3% podcast with Chad Post, the director of Open Letter, and Tom Roberge, co-owner of Riff Raff Books in Providence, Rhode Island. Riff Raff Bar and Books, in Providence, Rhode Island. And Tom Roberge had just done an article on Manchette. An article I have not read because I wanted to read Manchette first. I believe for the LA Review of Books. And he was talking about sort of a lack of great noir in translated literature. And that it shouldn't be the province of just American crime novels. And that there was all this great noir. And then, Manchette is sort of the example of one that he really loves. And as he's doing other titles of writers that he likes, they're all matching up. And I love noir. It was one of my first loves of literature. I still come back to it really regularly. So I was very excited to read him. He kind of hinted that there was social aspects to Manchette, political aspects. And so I was very interested to dive into it, and I loved it. So I've set the scene for you. What's going to come with Three to Kill as you're this Parisian man? It's claustrophobic and it's terrifying. You're going to be hunted by men you don't know for reasons you don't understand, all connected to that first scene. Through this process, you're going to change drastically. All of the things that you knew about your life that were firm, steady, and set in stone, you either have to question them, break them apart. You have to tear down the entire system of your life because you're being hunted and your life is on the line. For the first time in your life, presumably, the stakes are extremely high. You are not comfortable. And you're going to have to answer questions about yourself, who you are at some sort of gut core, not what you do for a career, not which political party you vote for, not what kind of father you are even, which is deeper. Not what kind of husband or lover you are, which is deeper than those first two questions. Something more akin to survival. What will you do to survive? Will you be able to do it? What guttural instincts do you have? And how will those fashion themselves? What plays out is a tremendous noir, a tremendous story that is very difficult, frankly, to review because the great thing about noir is the discovery. The writing is impeccable. I did not find a lot of political here, but I want to mention that Tom Roberge in the podcast noted that this was a good one to start with. And I can see why, because you're getting all of the stylistic flourishes in a very thin volume and a very tight story. It's claustrophobic even though we're going to move. I mentioned the driving, and the driving through Paris and to the beach and the countryside and even some traveling by foot. There is a traveling aspect to this book, but it still feels claustrophobic. One, probably because you're being hunted by killers. That'll mess with you. That'll make you feel trapped kind of in yourself. And two, because there's no safety net other than his own instincts. That is his only, rope that you're hanging on to as you fall to your death is just whatever you've got. And that can be claustrophobic because it is so much in your own head, because you can only rely on yourself. But the one part that I do think could be connected to the political is what I said earlier about those systems having to be thrown apart. He is comfortable, right? Think about neoliberalism in the West. And by the West, I'm going to say the English-speaking world right now. So America, Australia, England. And you've heard me talk about this before, particularly at my negative review of Dag Solstad's Professor Anderson's Night. And you know that I'm not a fan of neoliberalism in so much as it expresses itself today, because it is so safe and because it relies on the very systems of oppression and injustice and unfairness to sort of perpetuate itself. In order to have that safe cocoon of comfort, you still need to be on the backs of labor that is marginalized and abused for the purposes of capital. In neoliberalism, the sort that I'm talking about, and it's such a big, loaded, huge word that I don't want to run you off. Certainly I've voted for far more liberals in my lifetime than leftists. Those are the options. Incremental change is not bad. Local politics, national politics, there are times when you must defeat the face of tyranny. Okay? And neoliberalism does do that. It stops there. Because it seems to want the appearance of fairness without actual fairness. What does this have to do with Through to Kill? I think that this is the type of man in this cocoon, and that then something drastic happens to his life and he must shake up the system of his own life. And if we are making political comparisons, I believe that this man could represent many, many more men, and in fact a whole entire system or nation or party or group of people. Things are okay until they are not. And when they are not, how will you react? I took that away, but I would not have taken that away without being primed. One of the reasons that I don't read a lot of stuff before I read a book is I don't want to be primed. I want to go in blind as a reader. It's my favorite thing in the world, reading, and I want to explore and discover on my own. One of my last reviews, Clarice Lispector, I read nothing about her. Nothing. Literally the back cover. I knew she was a hot name because I've seen her name in my Twitter feed, but I knew nothing about her. I read this thing and my mind was... And then I started to read a little bit more and a little bit more, and the pieces of mythology start coming in and fit into this broader concept. Okay, well, with Manchette, I knew nothing. Had never heard of him until Tom Roberge made this comment. Or comments. on the podcast. If he had not mentioned the political aspect, I would not have noticed it at all. So does it exist? Or did I create it because I personally needed a political framework in which to understand this book? Because let me tell you something very important about this book. It is a straight up crime thriller. I don't know if it's been made into a movie. It should. It would just be a great thriller action movie. You could see Ryan Gosling as the perfect star if we're going to Americanize this and just throw it in Idaho, okay? And Ryan Gosling would do a tremendous job, and 3 to Kill would make millions of dollars, and I would bet potentially get an Oscar. Yeah, because while it's a thriller, there's also that internal, that like is perfect bait for award type shows, right? Because it's not just popcorn candy, but you get to go for the popcorn candy. There's also these other elements of self, and those are definitely there. But are the political themes there? Or am I reading too much into it because I was primed? I don't know. That's fascinating to me in and of itself. There are references to workers kind of throughout the book. There are references to old socialists, old communists, just quick, just pooh, pooh. You know, this person used to be this. He saw a rally over here, you know, and you just zoom right past them if you were not looking for them or thinking about them. I'm very excited to read more of his work and to see how it expresses itself, and if I even believe it does express itself, or if I've been primed. If you've read any of his books and you have a suggestion, or if you've read 3 to Kill and you have comments on what you think thematically might be going on, because again, many readers, I'll guess 90% of readers that pick this up with no priming, I think would say thematically there's the story. The guy, what themes do you need? It's fairly cut and dry. It's a noir, and it's a great noir. Is there something else going on? I think that's a great question. So, that's my review today. Highly recommend. I'm going to show you what I'm going to review next. And then I'm also going to tell you a little bit about a small change that I've made to the channel in light of a recent review. So, so much better than the cuts, right? Just move. Go get the book. Sit back down. Next, I'm going to review Die My Love by Ariana Harwitz, translated by Sarah Moses and Carolina Orloff from Charco Press. And we'll talk no more about this until it's time to review. The change is this. I am not going to review Birthday by Cesar Aria, translated from the Spanish by Chris Andrews, New Directions. I'm not going to review this book. It is beautiful though, isn't it? Because I'm no longer going to do any negative reviews. That doesn't mean I won't talk about a book. For instance, Professor Anderson's Night. I had enough that bothered me about the ideology that it was poking fun of in that book that I would probably want to talk for 15 minutes. So there are times, right? But overall, I can't recommend this book. 25 minutes after I finished, I had remembered pretty little of it because it had no impact. There was nothing in it that grabbed me and pulled me. And I want to share those books because there's so many of them. And there's no reason for you to watch me just complain about how something in my reading life did not work out. I have a problem. It's that I finish all the books. Now this one it's Cesar Aria, right? So it's 50 pages. Of course you're going to finish it. But I mean, I finish all of them. I keep going. And that's my own problem, and I don't need to force it on you, the viewer. But I do want to say a few notes about Cesar Aria, because The Literary Conference is one of my favorite books. Cesar Aria famously has a style where if he writes himself into a problem, he just keeps writing. He has to write himself out. So some people have called that note editing. I don't think that's exactly right. I mean, he's a masterful writer. He truly is. And so I think that he's editing kind of as he's going along. But once he's written a scene in the thing, he has to figure out a way to meld it. And he mixes genres, and it's fourth wall breaking, and there's usually a character that's him, and you know, there's all these kind of postmodern elements, and he's very good at it, and it's very funny. He's a very funny writer. But because of that style and the fact that he releases, I don't know how many in his own language he releases, but New Direction seems to put out at least one a year. I mean, and he writes a ton of books. They're just so hit or miss for each individual reader. You know, the literary conference really worked for me as a metaphor for how to create art and how to write. And I recommend, Damian Keller has a video on YouTube that was my inspiration for starting this channel. I didn't know anything about BookTube, and Damian reviewed the literary conference and talked about its themes, and I just loved it. And then I think like a year after that, I decided that, I want to do the same thing for some books. But that book really hit home for me, right? But I have up there in my shelf, I definitely have an episode in the life of a landscape painter, which is one of his classics that didn't do anything for me. I can remember the language was nice and nothing else. And then I have another book called Conversations that I remember them talking about some movies and nothing else. So some of them just don't work. And when there's so many of them, I think that his work is just best viewed through a much wider lens. And if I read something of his that I find to be very, very good, I'll review it. But otherwise, I think, and this is the case for all the books that I don't really like, I'm just going to pass because there's nothing that I can say to illuminate. I'm not encouraging people to read it. And I don't need to tell you every single sentence that I read. That isn't or shouldn't be the point. But it's tough when you get starting with this, right? Because like one of the things you have internally is you want to be honest and fair, like because you want to be a critic, right? I mean, the dream of my life would be to read for a living. And as a critic, of course, you have to be critical. And I am critical of works that I even like, but what is the point to me with a small viewership and a small little just group of people that I want to share these thoughts with to sit here and say, well, I didn't like this and I don't think it's any good and there's no reason for you to read this. Okay, well, that's 2 minutes, maybe attach some themes to it, talk a little bit about what it was trying to do, what it did that just didn't work for you, maybe compare it to some other books that did work for you. Well, it doesn't work for me, that whole concept. I want to dig more into the stuff that really moves me. And so the things that don't move me, I'm going to skip. And this is the last one that I'll reference like that. Although you could see Cesar Ari on this channel because, as I said, I like him as a writer. But when you write that many books, I'm probably not going to like every book. And in fact, I would be surprised if anyone liked every book because there's a lot of books. It's kind of like not liking a chapter and thinking of his whole work as one very, very, very long. Actually, I wonder how long it would all be. Right now, I'm reading Rodrigo Fresn's The Invented Part. I wonder if all of Cesar Aria's work would be as long as just that one book, which is the second in a trilogy. Anyway, I'm only 100 pages through that, and I'm very, very, very into it. So next up, we're going to have Ariana Harwitz, Die My Love, translated by Sarah Moses and Carolina Orloff from Charco Press. Thank you guys again. Be good to folks.